Influencers, inspiration, and Instagram. This is Earned by Tribe Dynamics. Here's Connor Begley.
All right, number 4. This is big number 4, and I think I have one of my best guests yet. So we have Mehdi at the mic here of Rare Beauty and NYX Cosmetics. But before we get specifically into Mehdi, as always, have to thank the Ipsy team. So thank Doak, Jen, Elizabeth, Robert, Nick, the whole crew. So thanks, guys, for letting us use the studio space and getting us all set up in something that's so official. So the reason I'm so excited to have Mehdi here, for those that don't know, Mehdi is quite the legend around the space, one of the silent warriors that people don't talk about unless you're in the industry. And so Mehdi's background is he was very early on at NYX Cosmetics and eventually became the VP of Digital there. And NYX was one of the best performing brands that we tracked at the time. And then has now gone on to launch his own brand, Rare Beauty, which was launched with Selena Gomez. And we can't talk a lot about that today. We're going to try and squeeze a thing or two out of him, but we'll have to be a little bit limited there. And just on a personal note, I think Mehdi is one of the smartest people there is when it comes to digital marketing, that whole kind of arena. So I think he's always one step ahead of everybody else, which is annoying on my part, but I get to learn from it. So
none of that is true. But that's all right.
No, it totally is. All right, so let's go through your background.
Cool.
So you grew up in Beirut, right?
Yes.
And then came to the United States.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about how you got here, when you came over, what that process was like. Love to just so people know what your background's like.
Yeah, I I was born actually in Michigan in the U.S. So grew up there until I was about 9 years old.
How did I get that so screwed up?
No, but I did grow up in Beirut. When I was 9 years old, we moved back to Lebanon because my family is originally Lebanese, and my parents really wanted us to get that kind of cultural experience of growing up there. It was tough at first, but eventually I really fell in love with the place. It's an incredible place to grow up, right on the Mediterranean. So amazing food, amazing culture. I just had the time of my life when I lived there.
Yeah, that's such a big transition for somebody 9 years old. You're like just figuring out like who you are.
Yeah. And,
like as a person.
To go from being this kind of like, suburban Michigan kid to moving to kind of just, towards the end of the Civil War in Beirut. It was a big shift, but I think it helped shape a lot of who I am today is growing up there and being exposed to so many different cultures and religions and different types of people. Yeah. It was really a great experience, and I don't think I'd be where I am if I hadn't grown up there.
Yeah. And then you came back. And when did you say you came back?
So I moved back in 2000 for school. I just graduated high school and wanted to come back to the States to kind of continue my education. So I moved back in 2000.
And then you studied political science, right?
Yeah, and that was kind of my major in school, and it was, it kind of took me a little while to figure out what I wanted to do. I started off thinking that I would do, kind of that first year you really jump into a little bit of everything. And
you had that advantage. When I was going to school, we had to like pick our major before we got there. And so I was like, I don't know. I was like, business? Like, what do I, so clueless. And, luckily there's some flexibility within that. You can choose to focus on economics or finance or this or that, the other thing. What was your path through there? Like, what was it pre-political science? What did you go in thinking you wanted to study?
I'd thought about, potentially psychology. I thought about computer science, kind of all the different things that I was interested in. Yep. It wasn't until, and you kind of think of the context of the time, a person who Middle Eastern from origin, Arabic background, Muslim sounding name, and, moved here in 2000. So just getting my bearings. And then 2001, we go back to school and 9/11 happens. And when you're in that
I didn't even
position,
think about that context.
Right. You're kind of a younger Middle Eastern male at the time. It was pretty scary time to look around, and you kind of saw both the worst in people, but also in the best in people, because you had
saw the
some
extremes,
people, right? And you had some people that that kind of rejected your friendship after that point, and some people who embraced you even more closely. So, you know, I think young people today kind of don't really understand what the world was like at the time, but it was scary. No one knew what was going on. And
I think people in general were a lot less accepting. Like, you don't realize it, but like, it was literally 20 years ago. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, and so naturally, kind of at that time, your whole existence becomes political.
Yeah.
You're just always, thinking about, what should I say? What can I do? How do I introduce myself? Think about all those different things. So I think naturally it just, for probably my whole generation of people who were moving here from the Middle East, it shifted the way we were thinking, and I think we became much more politically minded in that sense. And so naturally I started to dig more into that and delve deeper into that world.
Totally. I mean, I can see that. I mean, like, especially when you came over, because you came over right before that.
Right.
And then you have this very dramatic change, I would imagine.
Yeah. Which
is, you got to experience both worlds versus coming into it right away.
Right.
Yeah, that's wild. I had no idea. I feel like I've known you for a while and I don't know any of this stuff.
No, it's you don't talk about it very much because I think the world is much different now than it was then, and you make some of the best friends ever because you kind of have people who really stand by you even more closely after that point. And so it was it's one of those things where you kind of come out of it a little bit tougher, a little bit more of a realization of what's important and who matters. And things don't kind of you don't stress about things as much because you kind of have already been through a couple of traumatic experiences in that sense.
Totally. Yeah. And then you graduated. Mm-hmm. Did you go directly to Cision? Is that where you were next? Or was there a path before there?
Yeah, no, I went there afterwards. Really just thought it would be just like a kind of a quick job out of college, try to make some money. But I really enjoyed the work I was doing there. It was a lot of analysis in terms of media and capturing kind of, brands were tracking what people were saying about them. And so... So it was really interesting to see what brands were focused on, what media they were tracking, what keywords they wanted to know, what people were saying about them. So I was kind of working with brands like Netflix and American Airlines, and funny enough, one of them was L'Oreal.
There you go.
We were doing all the monitoring for them, so I got to see just in terms of what they were monitoring and the types of spends they were putting into media, and it was like, this is insane. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, the amount that they spend on marketing in general is wild. And then, I mean, the funny thing is at that time, I mean, those budgets are tiny compared to what they're spending on digital now, right?
Right.
And that's interesting. I mean, I guess that probably provide a lot of context for, because then you kind of moved over to Nix after that. And I'd love to talk about that kind of transition. Sure. But I think having all of that context, seeing all those brands and the way they're approaching the problem and like the magnitude of the issue, which is just this massive volume of coverage these companies are getting that maybe they aren't leveraging as well. Was that a big part of the kind of success for you at Nix, was having that context prior to getting there?
Absolutely. When I came over, we were still a tiny brand. It had a little bit of success in Ulta, but it was just starting to be picked up in terms of social media, and that drove a lot of our thinking, was knowing that, the way that people discover beauty at this point was through television ads and magazine ads and things like that. And so we didn't have those types of budgets to be able to compete there. So there wasn't necessarily any, great genius thought behind the strategy at the time. It was really just about, who's going to talk about our brand and who will do it in a way that we don't have to compete with these massive budgets. And so that's what drove a lot of our early strategy in terms of leveraging social media, Instagram, influencers, all of those things. But at the time, it probably felt as daunting as it does today when you're entering and creating a new beauty brand or trying to grow a beauty brand, and you look at the world of influencers and social media and you're like, how do I get started?
What's step one?
We felt the same way about it at the time with Nix. Is like, how do you market in this world? And you just, the key thing was being one of the early brands that tried new things and tested things out. And thankfully we hit a wave right at the right time.
Yeah. And then how did you get there in the first place, right? It's because Cision, you were in Chicago still. which is where you went to school. And then how did you end up moving to LA and joining this like small upstart beauty brand? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, I was kind of getting a little, honestly, bored with my job over there. It'd been a while. I'd kind of automated things where I was finishing up all my work within a few hours for the whole week, and so I started to look for a bunch of different side projects.
Of course you were.
Yeah. Okay. I started to like teach at a language center. I was doing consulting jobs. I was just picking up ways of kind of meeting new people and filling my time. And one of them was helping on a consulting project for Scott Friedman, who was eventually took over as the CEO of NYX. But I was helping on a little project that he was doing, and we just had a great rapport in terms of how we were working together. And so when he took over when he took the role of CEO of NYX at the time, he called me up. I think I was the first person he called up and was like, "Hey, I want to bring you on board. I'm not sure for what yet, but I want to bring you into a small cosmetics company." And so from my perspective, I was like, just probably went through another 40 below winter in Chicago, and I was like, you know what, I'm ready to make the move out to LA. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to take a chance. I hadn't really known much about the brand, but I met the people. I had a really great vibe from them. The private equity investment group was amazing. I loved working with those guys too. So I was just like, I feel like the right people are in place to make this a success. So I jumped on board.
That's cool. Yeah, the winters in Chicago seem awfully motivating. I've never lived out there during one of them, but I mean, my stepsister or sister-in-law, I guess, is living out there right now. And she'll be there for a few years, but she'll be back pretty soon. Like I don't think it's going to be motivating to stick around.
I love the city. It's an incredible city. I had a great time there.
The people are incredible. Like just the nicest people in the world.
It's great. I love the city. It's just a little too cold for me.
Yeah, for sure. So you've continued with Scott then. So obviously you continue to work with Scott through NYX and now onto Rare Beauty. We talked a little bit about Grace Ray in the last episode and what her leadership style is. What is it about Scott's leadership style that made you want to continue to work with him at another company?
I mean, Scott, I think is in my mind probably the best CEO in the business, and I'm probably a little biased there, but I think
it's worked out well so far.
Yeah, it's worked out well. He's had some successes, and really he's an incredible leader. More than anything, there's different types of CEOs across the board. He's the type of CEO that really values culture of a company. He will put people in place who share the common culture, and people who are have integrity, who are friendly, who will build strong teams. So he's really kind of an enabler, and if you're someone who's looking to grow in your career, that's the best position you can be in, because he will bring on the right people and then trust them to do what they need to do. And he's been great for myself. It's been an amazing partnership, and I think it's not a surprise that so many of the people who work with him continue wanting to work with him, because he's just he's an incredible guy, and when he's the type of person who will let the team work on what they need to work on. He'll trust them. He doesn't hold you to a budget. If there's a great new idea that comes up, he'll be like, yeah, let's go for it. We'll figure it out. But then when the tough conversations need to be had, and there's any type of crisis that you need to deal with, he's completely reliable to jump in there and move mountains and make things happen. And everyone in the industry just loves him and respects him, and you get a lot done from that perspective. So he's been great to work with.
Yeah, he's very just I think being level-headed in a crisis is incredibly important, of which I'm actually probably not very good at it. I get my hair gets on fire and I just run in some direction, which occasionally solves the problem, but also freaks everybody out along the way, which is just not the right way to handle leadership. So that's cool. Not surprising. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about I want to go back to NYX one more time. So you started out with Scott at NYX and in this kind of fairly undefined role. And then how did you, what was the path between there and eventually being this, the VP of digital, and then post-acquisition by L'Oreal? I think you were really used by a lot of the L'Oreal organization as like, how do we learn about digital? Oh, go talk to Mehdi. What was your path getting from there to there? Like, how did you really kind of stake out that digital was your focus? And then what were your, how did you grow in that space over time?
So when Scott brought me on board, he essentially said, look, I don't know what exactly I want you to do yet. I just know I want to bring you on board. I was a bit of a generalist at the time. And so he kind of gave me a mandate of heading up special projects, which meant like, essentially what he told me is, look, we're coming into a new company and there's going to be a lot of different holes in areas. So find where you think there's a big gap and plug yourself in. And I think everyone was happy to have someone who was helping because at the time they were just really just, people who were running the brand on instinct a lot and making a lot of great decisions, and some were a little bit mistakes. And so I think they were happy to have someone to come in and help out. So I came in and I think when I started coming from a data background with Cision, my first day that I started, I was like, well, can I take a look at our analytics to understand our customer? And they were like, oh, what's that?
I don't know why people don't use that more. There's like so much there.
So much
just with
data.
Something like just simple as Google Analytics, there's like an infinite number of things you can investigate there.
Unbelievable amount of data.
It's like,
but
how are you not looking at that?
Yeah, there wasn't anyone really heading up e-commerce at the time, so there was no one looking at that. So they were like, well, where would we get that? And I was like, well, who's managing the digital? And they were like, well, it's kind of like with IT and creative, and so there was no one really spearheading that. And I was like, okay, I think I know where the big hole I have to plug myself into is. So I literally just started to teach myself reading blogs, reading just different books, and figuring out what how to approach e-commerce and digital. And at the time, we had just gone through a stress test on the website, and I think we found, and this is back in 2011, so this was ages ago, but we found that basically the website would crash if 40 people were on it, and it was like, okay, we probably need to re-platform here. So I got the ability to spearhead a re-platforming project, so I got to learn a lot there.
And what platform did you guys choose?
Well, at the time there was again, our budgets were really small, so we went on a small platform called ASP.NET Storefront.
Okay.
There was the choice between that or Magento. One was much less expensive than the other, so we knew that it would kind of hold us over until a certain amount of revenue, and then we would have to switch over. Which was great, and so we were able to do quite a lot on there.
You guys were that was a big thing for you guys, was being scrappy early on in the process. You're supposed to turn off your phone before you get into
just try
but he's an important guy. Don't
turn it off. No, it was great. It held us over, and we put a lot of focus in terms of driving that experience, in terms of what is that experiential process for the consumer as they're going through, what does the unboxing look like? What does the post-purchase checkout look like? All those different things. That's what we focused on, and we were like, the revenue will come later. Let's focus on the experience because we're still in the brand building mode right now.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. Okay, so let's get into your kind of general marketing philosophies. So for you, when you think about kind of the philosophies that have driven the brands that you've been a part of, right? So obviously Rare is still very new, but NYX specifically, how do you think about building a brand? How do you think about building a brand in the space that you're in? Like, what are the different, and you've touched on it a little bit right now, which is like really controlling that kind of touch by touch customer experience. But talk about that a little bit more.
I think I take credit from the fact that I came into this not knowing what I was doing and learning on the job, and so I didn't really have a frame of reference to go by, and so I really started to look at it from the consumer perspective, both from the digital standpoint and also from the beauty standpoint. Didn't know anything about makeup. I didn't know anything about how to market to a makeup shopper, and so I really was like, well, I need to understand the way the consumer approaches it, because if I can get into that person's mind, then I can understand the way to to do this. And a lot of it was driven by the fact that we would test out all the best practices for e-commerce, and we would try everything that the experts tell you to do, and none of it worked. and then I started looking at it, and I was like, well, the
irony is a lot of people can't figure out what doesn't work.
Right.
They just do it because, I'm supposed to do this, and they just keep doing it. And it's like, is that, I don't,
Yeah. And it's at that point that I figured out, and I also want to say I would look at Amazon, and I was like, well, I buy everything from Amazon.
Yeah.
No one buys beauty from Amazon. So if those guys, the smartest e-commerce people in the universe, can't figure out how to crack beauty, maybe there isn't this like magic trick that you can use, or gamification, or whatever you would do that would drive a traditional e-commerce purchase. Maybe that doesn't work in beauty. And so approaching it from that perspective and understanding that beauty was much more of an emotional experience. It's much more tactile. It's much more experiential. You want to swatch the products, you want to touch it, you want to feel what the consistency is. That's what I started to learn, and at the time, everyone was selling even like these virtual try-on tools, and everyone was like, this is going to be the biggest game changer. Yeah, but when I started to ask people, would you use this? They were like, no, I wouldn't. I need to feel what it's like on my face and skin tone. So we never really focused on rolling those out at the time, even though that was the tech thing to do.
Yep.
But from the consumer perspective, they weren't looking for that. They just wanted a better experience.
Consumer is king on this stuff.
They wanted content.
Yep.
They wanted to see what it looks like on people, and that's where Instagram really came into play, because now you had this wealth of, and YouTube as well, but
YouTube
Instagram
for sure.
had this wealth of content where you could see very specifically what that shade of lipstick looks on someone who has your same skin tone, or you could get people's feedback that aren't necessarily being pushed by the brand. So that's where I kind of shifted my focus, and my philosophy was, let's really understand it from the consumer perspective and let that drive what we're doing from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, which is, it seems so straightforward, but that really should be like the way that you approach this. It's like, if I'm going to buy this product, what is my process to purchase this product?
Right.
And like, how do I make decisions when I'm buying this? Like, go through that and then, and then hit those touch points.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Anyways, it's kind of beside the point. So for you guys, when you were at NYX, what were the areas so you tested stuff that worked, you tested stuff that didn't work. What were the things that worked and what were the things that didn't work?
For us, what worked were, influencer was huge for us. They were big fans of the brand. We developed amazing relationships with them.
Yep.
And we really focused on elevating the influencers that we could identify who were creating great content.
Yep.
We would focus more on, let's elevate those people through the Face Awards, through our own Instagram, and let's not focus as much on trying to get the mega that everyone else is trying to approach.
Yeah.
Let's try to get that next crop of people to come up.
Mm-hmm.
YouTube was huge as well. We were always highly performing on YouTube, and I think the fact that the brand was so affordable was really important. And then also I want to say that I think the underrated element was just I think it was a brand that people really felt passionate about because of the mission of like bringing this makeup artistry, all these colors, all these different shades, making it accessible, having it at a price point that that struggling makeup artist who couldn't afford to fill her makeup bag with the high-end brands really kind of gravitated towards NYX because she could fill 30 or 40 or 50 shades of foundation in her bag without
for like a fairly reasonable
budget.
price. Yeah. Because I think a lot of these people are people that are solo entrepreneurs or like running their own little practices, and you can't spend an obscene amount of money all the time on this kind of stuff. So we've talked a little bit about marketing. Mm-hmm. So when you were obviously post NYX, once NYX got acquired, you're moving into a much larger organization. Yeah. Within a larger organization, there's going to be inherently just more process to work through.
Sure.
What were some of the challenges in that transition? So if you were to be, say, you were somebody that was in a brand that was going through a similar transition, what would be some of your advice for them in order to make it more successful? And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
I would say it was, being acquired by L'Oreal for us at the time was really daunting because, and also exciting because we were like, well, you know, this is L'Oreal, like they invented marketing, you know? And so, you know, we expected that they would, you know, acquire us and essentially teach us what marketing means and how to do it. So we were kind of like, okay, this is great. They're gonna, you know, come in and take this over and really give us, you know, kind of like business school on steroids. So we were excited from that perspective, but that wasn't essentially what happened. They really wanted to learn from us, and they were, you know, to their credit, super open-minded, and you know, we had people from all the different brands, from Lancôme, from L'Oréal Paris, from, you know, across the spectrum. They were reaching out to us because they wanted to understand what we were doing and not necessarily vice versa. So you know, getting getting integrated in the L'Oréal system, you know, we've heard of other brands who kind of put up a wall between the brand and L'Oréal. We didn't do that. We were really, because we wanted to have that experience and learning from working with a big company like that. But they were amazing. They gave us time to integrate slowly. They did whatever they could to preserve the brand. They helped us in a lot of the different areas where they felt like we did need some support. You know, gave us the budget that we needed to grow the brand and to expand internationally.
Because you guys expanded really quickly post-acquisition.
Very quickly, and it was, you know, the brand was on fire. And to their credit, they have probably the best in, you know, in any industry in the world, the best teams globally to be able to take a brand, identify what the DNA is, identify what makes that brand work, and then figure out how to roll it out in their markets. So, you know, we had a really great experience early on. We had Natalie Christo come on as kind of our new head of marketing and eventually GM. And, you know, I learned so much from her. She was an incredible resource, and she did the same. I think really wanted to help us where we needed help to kind of professionalize what we were doing and to scale it up. But at the same time, didn't want to mess with what made the brand work and what was so special about the brand.
Totally, that makes sense. And Natalie's now at Huda, right?
Yeah,
as
she
a
is.
CEO. Yeah, continues her streak there. We'll see. Very cool. And so, getting back to some of the marketing philosophy stuff, what are some of the other brands that you admire? So when you're thinking about, you know, any brands that you pay attention to, could be inside the industry, outside of the industry. How do you think about that? Or what are some of those brands you look at?
The brands that I admire, I mean, I would say I really. I still love NYX. I'll always have a spot in my heart for NYX. I really want that brand to continue to grow and succeed. And you know, I just, it's always going to be kind of the first. I think it's going to be a trailblazing brand that really made a big impact in people's lives. And so it's always going to be special to me. I think all of the L'Oreal brands, they have some incredible brands. Kiehl's, you know, Lancôme, L'Oréal Paris, Maybelline. I think, you know, in this kind of like Estee Lauder world, everyone is trying to point out all the things that brands are doing wrong or improperly. I want to say L'Oreal, they're genuinely good people, and they want to do what's right by the consumer, and they want to make sure that the products are, you know, that they work, they're efficacious, that they are, they're safe. They invest a lot in product quality. So, you know, I'm always just amazed by it, like how much as an organization they still try to improve and keep improving the industry in general.
Well, you know, it's hard to get that big without having some central tenets and philosophies that stick around. Like I remember being at a conference, and it was a digital conference. I think Jean-Paul Agon was speaking. And he opened up the digital conference by saying product. Like that was what his messaging was. He's like, all of this stuff helps to amplify the product, amplify the brand. But if we're not creating products that are worth talking about, there's no point in doing it, right? And
and I think people can tend to forget a little bit that brands really are just the people that are behind the brands, and whatever the kind of the DNA and the philosophy of the people who are working at the brands is, that's what's going to be reflected in the brand itself.
Yeah, totally.
So, brands aren't these things that just kind of manifest themselves. There aren't these like marketing people who are sitting there and dictating everything. It really is just, decision by decision every day, things that you're focused on as your own priorities. That's what comes out in the brand. And so there's a ton out there that I'm really impressed by. I think, you mentioned Natalie with Huda. That's a brand that I don't think gets enough credit. I think Huda, for whatever reason, she gets a lot of negativity in the influencer space, and I'm not sure why. Because I don't think people understand just how much of an impact she's having, specifically in the Middle East. To be a Muslim Arab woman who is launching this makeup brand from the Middle East, and probably doing more than anyone to change the perceptions around gender and around kind of men in beauty and the almost normalizing that in the Middle East, in a culture where people aren't so open-minded about it. I think what she's doing is extremely brave, and I think it's very political, and she probably puts herself at risk by posting the way she does and showcasing men and showing trans people on her page, and so I don't think she gets enough credit for how brave of a person that she has been with her brand. So I really respect what they've been doing.
Yeah, I think without having cultural context there, it's hard to fully appreciate it. And I think, it makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm trying to remember the other example. It doesn't matter. We can go back to it later. So, it's hard to, without full cultural context, know, what people are going through and what they're putting themselves at risk for. That's very cool. Okay, so obviously we focus on the influencer space. So what, when you're trying to stay up to date, both on marketing, influencers, those kinds of things, what are the resources that you use? Are you a big Twitter guy? Do you like Reddit? Is there some influencer newspaper I don't know about? Like, what are you keeping up to date on?
I'm on all of the above.
Okay.
I'm on, I still to this day watch a lot of YouTube content, specifically with the beauty influencers, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, TikTok. I'm kind of following it all because I think, again, putting yourself in the perspective of the consumer, you have to digest the content the way their mega fans do. And so if you're not, and you can't just kind of like dip your toe in and then dip your toe out and be like,
I watched a video.
Right. That doesn't work. You have to watch, you have to watch it consistently and see, what they're going through and what they're focused on and what they're talking about, because this industry, being in it now since 2011, it shifts really probably once a year, where the entire industry has shifted, and influencer has been a big part of that. And even the influencer world has shifted so many times in the 9 years that I've been in the space. So, I when people kind of say, oh, there's this like monolith of what influencer means, I'm like, well, no, that's, it meant something completely different 2 years ago and 4 years ago and 6. It's just constantly changing. So the only consistency about that world is how much it changes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So in today's world, so if we were to look at it like today, how do you think about working with creators? Because obviously Rare is being launched with one of the biggest in the world, which I think people don't fully appreciate how big her audience is. It's like her, Rihanna, Kylie, and Beyonce. So how do you think about working with creators, both, at a top level? Obviously you're launching a brand with one, but, on a more day-to-day level as well. What are your philosophies there? What's your approach?
I think starting off with it, you have to respect what they do and what they're going through, because that's probably one of the hardest jobs you can have. And I know people downplay it. It's like, oh, you're posting on Instagram. There are consumed
a lot of work to get in there.
Yeah, they're consumed 24/7 with what exactly you need to be posting and on every channel. And you can go into your job and be like, you know what, I'm not feeling great today. I'm gonna kind of coast a little bit. They don't get to do that. They have to be on all the time, posting content, thinking of what the next piece of content is going to be. So I really respect what they go through, and at the same time, they don't have necessarily the stability of like a steady paycheck. They don't know from day to day how YouTube is going to change the way they get compensated, or how brands decide how they're going to get compensated, or how, there's so much up in the air in their lives. So I think it helps when you approach them with that knowledge of what they struggle with, and then work with them in a way that I think helps them. That's always the approach that we've taken is, of course you can throw money at them and that's great, but you build a longer term relationship by saying, hey, how can I help you outside of, paying you for this content? What can I do to help you, with other projects that you're working on, for example? I think that matters a lot to them, and that's what's been helpful to building some of these longer lasting relationships.
Totally. I mean, I think we've seen it really consistently where if the brand can use their own platform to accelerate a creator's career, whether it's giving them really cool studio space, or it's sharing their content onto their channel, or it's, whenever you think about these things, thinking about what is the benefit that this person's going to get outside of any cash compensation, I think is like super, super important. And as well, like going back to like how hard they have it, I really think of them as publishers. Like they are competing for dollars with the magazines, with TV shows, right? Like with very large organizations that are very well resourced. Now those organizations are struggling right now, but like these are, they're competing against the big boys, and ultimately, they don't have those resources, and so they get there just through grit and scrappiness and hard work, and it's really cool to see. And I think, like you said, it gets made fun of for being like, oh, you're just taking photos on Instagram, like who cares? But that's not. There's a lot more that goes into it, especially when you start from the ground up and really have to grow it. Very cool. So when you guys for you guys, as you're thinking about, you don't have to talk about Rare too much, but when you're thinking about kind of how you budget and what your team looks like how do you think about structuring your team? Because I've thought a lot about, if you have like a digital group, well, how is that different than marketing, and how is that different than, how are these intermixed? How do you guys think about that balance? Like, where do responsibilities lie? How do you communicate amongst those teams? I'd love to hear more about that.
I mean, that's I would say you want it to be as fluid as possible in terms of, first of all, from Scott and myself and our entire team, we always want to make sure that we have a very kind of flat organization. What we don't want is these different layers of like, you have to go to talk to this person before you talk to that person. We want it to feel like one big team, and everyone can kind of contribute ideas. It doesn't matter where they come from. So, so in terms of, structuring of the team, that's probably the least important or the least interesting thing to me. To me, it's all about, let's bring in the best people and figure out where they fit the best. Who can they learn from the best? So, whether it goes under digital or marketing or product development, or, it almost doesn't matter where the person falls under an org chart, as long as everyone's working collaboratively and that person's continuing to learn and feel supported. That's the way I approach it, and the way we try to structure the team. So, so to me, it's, I could have 50 people reporting to me, I could have none reporting to me, and I would feel the same way. And as long as everyone is kind of cohesively working together and on the same page, I almost don't care about the structure. And so, my title, I think, is a little bit vague in terms of, head of digital. What does that mean? I think part of it is, there's a certain skill set towards what a head of marketing does that I've always felt like I can never get there, because I think it's primarily should be people who use the product, and I'm not someone who uses the product every day. I don't live it and breathe it in that sense, so I can't accurately portray that side of the business. But at the same time, I can kind of give insights into different areas at work and approach it from kind of the perspective of someone who is an outsider looking in, saying, let's try these things, and maybe let's try something a little bit different. And you kind of don't fall under the groupthink that can kind of set in a little bit in the space.
Yeah, totally. And that even as you guys scaled up Nix, you were able to maintain a relatively flat structure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Okay, that's cool.
We, that's a culture thing. That's if you have people at that level who really work towards bringing everyone into the fold and into the mix, then and I think that comes from a sense also of humility and also being secure with where you are. I think where you fall into the traps of, people creating these like structures and silos, a lot of time it's because they're insecure, and so they need everything to kind of flow through them.
Yeah.
I think if you're secure in what you're offering and what you're doing, then you really want people to get exposure, and you want people to interact with as many people as they can. So I think the more people would focus on kind of creating organizations like that, I think it'll help a lot with some of the challenges in the beauty space, which aren't always structured that way.
For sure. And I think especially in kind of a day and age where speed matters a lot, and speed is being valued, both by the media channels, but also just by, it's just advantageous to know what your customers think about a product and be able to respond really quickly. I think it'll be a good structure moving forward. So I feel like I said at the beginning, you're always kind of on the cutting edge. So you're always telling me something that I've never heard about. Like I remember you very early on, you're like, it's all about Reddit. Like you got to get on Reddit. There's a whole beauty community there that nobody knows about. So what are the areas that you're thinking about right now that maybe like other people aren't tapping into, or you've noticed like, hey, there's this pocket over here. Obviously TikTok's a really big deal right now, but that's becoming a little more well known. Is there anything out there that I don't know about that the crowd needs to know about?
Nothing that you probably don't know about. I think, I still think YouTube is probably underutilized from that perspective. I think the brands that are doing the best work are still focusing mostly on YouTube. Obviously, like someone like Jeffree Star has an incredible success story.
Yeah, wild.
Through his content on YouTube, really, that's driving that. So I think that's still a strategy that, and it's because it's hard. It's hard to create compelling content. Yeah. It's hard to compete with Netflix, with other YouTube content. It's that's not easy to accomplish, and I think a lot of brands fail at that. But I think that's still where you drive the most kind of authentic but also meaningful connections with your consumer.
Totally. I mean, I think it's a big, like the barriers to entry on Instagram are so low. You can come in and start creating content very quickly. But YouTube, I mean, it's a real production value, right? Like Jeffree Star is a production studio at this point. And I don't think people appreciate how much effort that takes.
But he has an ability to connect with his audience and engage with them. And so I think that's, if the content isn't there, people aren't going to continue to watch. So I think, that's one of the areas where if you can kind of unlock that piece, create compelling content that people really enjoy, which is what he does better than anyone probably. Yeah. That's what's going to get people to have that strongest loyalty towards your brand.
Totally. All right, so let's get to the end of the show questions. Great. Couple rapid fire ones. So favorite book and why?
That's a tough one. Have so many. I would say one I've been reading recently that I really like is called *Sapiens*.
Yeah,
by Harari. One. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think it's it talks a lot about just the evolution of humans and why we structure society the way we are, and there's a lot there I think to learn about brands as well, and what brands are from the perspective of how we've evolved as a society, and storytelling is so important there, and so I've really enjoyed that one. I don't know what I would say is my favorite of all time, but that's the one I've been enjoying.
That's the one you're thinking about right now. Yeah. So what shows are you currently watching? Anything you're binging through?
I haven't been binging through much recently, just because we've been so focused on our big announcement. Succession was one that I spent.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, we were always sharing
Season
memes
2
from there. So good.
Just like
there's such
unquestionably good television. Like,
it's great.
So good.
Yeah. So that's probably the one that we've been kind of sharing the most around the office and joking around. But I haven't, I love watching TV. I love great storytelling. Yeah. But just in the past few weeks, it's been a little tough to find time.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. So what do you spend more time on? Cable, Netflix, or YouTube?
I don't have cable, so that one's out. Probably YouTube, and I find, more and more that's what I'm checking out first, because partially half of the time is, just for following up on what, what's happening in the beauty world, what influencers are saying. And then the other half of it, I think there's some really fun content on YouTube and some great stuff. So I'm kind of always just finding new channels to watch on there.
That's so weird to me. I'm still not in the surfing YouTube. I haven't gotten there yet. I don't.
Yeah, you kind of, you kind of have to have, I found that once I started to subscribe to certain channels that I find have good content, over time you start to go up on your page and you find that there's all this great stuff that you can watch, and you're like, oh, here's, maybe one of my interests being served, and here's another one. I'm a huge film buff. I love watching movies, and so there's so many of these channels that do great video essays about different movies, and you kind of get to watch what your interests are. I like a lot of sports. There's a lot of great sports content on there, so you just kind of follow all those
it's a billion hours a day, billion hours watched a day, and I think that's a year or two old, so it's even more than that now. Okay, so last one. This wasn't on the sheet, so you're not going to be prepped for this one.
No worries.
So if you wanted people to know one thing about Rare Beauty, what would it be?
Oh, man. If I wanted people to know one thing about Rare Beauty, I would say that this is going to be a brand with very strong purpose. Yep. It's not just going to be, this isn't just kind of partnering with a celebrity and launching products. I think it's going to be a brand that's very meaningful to people. I think it's going to have a lot of focus on helping people. Yep. Selena herself is someone who really is very passionate about making a difference and helping people. So that's kind of our guiding light on the brand. So, I know it's early and we just recently announced it, so people don't know specifically yet what it's going to look like and how it's going to take shape. But I think people will be pleasantly surprised with what we've come up with.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. Well, awesome, man. Number 4. You probably should have been number 1, but that's okay.
I've been holding you off a little bit because I knew you would ask me some of these questions.
It was good timing. Yeah. It's good timing. Rare's getting launched. But thanks so much for coming. Thanks again to the Ipsy team and everybody involved there. Really appreciate you guys letting us use the space. And if you ever need advice on digital, Mehdi is your guy. He knows, I'm telling you, more than anybody else. But thanks so much, guys.
Appreciate it.
Hit subscribe now. Earned by Tribe Dynamics. Tribe Dynamics unlocks your social media influencer community. Our platform not only tracks and measures your best influencer relationships, but discovers new influencers to grow your business through earned media. Get started with a demo today at tribedynamics.com. tribedynamics.com.